Hi everyone, William here, the Grand Duke Dmitri 1915 Diary Series. We are in Petrograd at the moment, and the diary entry for yesterday was about Dmitri being released from his health-related home confinement. He was supposed to be recuperating from the tonsillectomy that he'd had, but the doctor had given way to his pleading and allowed him to go out on the town that weekend. I don't know if the doctor quite had it in mind what he's going to end up doing today. And I have to say, today's diary entry, though it's short, requires about twice as many notes. Well, it's not really short, and it's not really twice as many, but it requires a lot of notes because there are so many people and places, and he's just really going to be on the town this time. I forgot to say yesterday, so for the recap, yesterday he also went to this nightclub, kind of cabaret, open mic, it almost seems like, although they wouldn't, of course, have had microphones back then, called Ugolik, which I forgot to say means corner or nook, some sort of out-of-the-way place, and indeed it was in a basement. And this whole thing really, not so much even yesterday's, but today's diary entry makes me think of a Soviet-era song, of all things, by a very popular band in the Soviet Union, certainly not approved by the state, a band called Kino, the German word for film, cinema, also the Russian word for cinema, with a very famous lead singer, Viktor Tsoi, who sort of threw the whole youth of the Soviet Union into national heartbreak when he was killed, I think, in an automobile accident. And the name of the song is You Just Want to Find Out What's Going On. So, только хочешь ты знать, где и что происходит. The you is a young person going out and just having a really pleasant time, looking for, going out by himself, but, picking up friends along the way, popping in here and there, just generally enjoying life. There's always just a slight element of wistfulness or sadness in Soviet songs, but this is precisely what Dmitri is going to be doing. And can we say that it's a Russian tradition to do this? I don't know. I've never been a nightlife kind of person, so I can't say if that's what people do here, if that's what people did, say, in Paris in 1915. But I will say, this is consistent with what Dmitri's doing in 1915 in Imperial Russia, with what young people were doing in the Soviet Union so many years later. And I always enjoyed, when I was at the University of Washington, living in student housing called Russian House, and we would have lots of guests. It was still, I graduated in '89. So it was still the Soviet Union, and although it was, perestroika, things had lightened up quite a bit. And that's how I learned this song. And I just loved when we had Russian guests, and we also had a Russian house mother and that sort of thing, the kind of Russian-style party where someone would have a guitar, there would be booze, it was very low-key, people come and go, and you sit around, and a lot of what you do is someone strums the guitar, you sing a little, and it's just nice. It's just nice. And this is the sort of thing that Dmitri was doing, but on a grander scale. I mean, this wasn't the Soviet Union, and he wasn't, an ordinary person, so things are definitely more glamorous. And I will say, another thing to note is that he's living right now the life of a guards officer. A lot of the people that he's seeing here in Petrograd are guards officers, and this is the kind of lives they led. And so, it's very consistent with what the other officers in his regiment and the other guards' regiments would have been doing. Our cast today, well, as I said, multiple. Okay, so it's the 14th/27th of February. That makes it it's past Valentine's Day in the West. The 14th of February, of course, is Valentine's Day, but that's not something that's on the Orthodox calendar and not something that's on the cultural calendar in Russia, so that's a non-issue. We're in Petrograd, Nevsky 41. It's -4 degrees, clear and windy. So, just come on along for this, and then I'll fill you in on who the people and places were after I've read the diary entry itself. Okay. This is, remember that he went to this nightclub the night before, and that's kind of our starting point here. Because I only went to bed around 5 a.m., I slept remarkably well, and so deeply that not even my tooth bothered me. That place from last night, Ugolik, was pretty nasty, and I don't think I'll go there again. I woke up around 11 o'clock this morning, had coffee in bed, got up, took a bath, and went to the Astoria to have lunch with Tornow. It was nice. Then I walked to the club and played billiards with Dmitri Sergeyevich Sheremetyev. It went very well. We played to 0. I don't know what that means. I'll just interject. At 5 o'clock, I had tea at the Astoria with Tornow. There were lots of people there. Gulesko. Then I dropped by the Hotel Europe to see Roger. She annoyed me terribly and was unbearable. At 7 o'clock, I went home. I dined at 8 o'clock with Mitusov and Alexei Zarnikow at the Astoria. Then I stopped by the Bear for a minute. I saw Yelena Dmitrievna Benkendorf and set off for the Mikhailovsky Theater. Monsieur Bretonneau Antoine played. Terrible torment. Afterwards, I went to the Hotel Europe with Murat to see Mademoiselle Zusil from the Mikhailovsky Theater. It was quite lively. We stayed until 6 a.m. Okay, so as I said, this is the grand imperial version of, the much more the humbler activity during the Soviet period. Okay, so as I said, when Dr. Polyakov gave Dmitri permission to go out, he probably didn't have this sort of activity in mind. Oh, well. So why didn't he like Ugolik? Well, I hesitated on the translation. So I put it as the respectable bordello. It could also be a proper bordello. In the way that word proper is sometimes used ironically in English. And I think he was speaking ironically when he called it a respectable bordello or a proper bordello. But proper probably captures it a little more because it is ironic. And at this stage in his life, Dmitri really liked things to be just orderly and familiar. There was a little bit of his father in him, even though he was much more of a man about town and a playboy than Paul had ever been. Paul just wanted an orderly life. And there's a little bit of Dmitri that doesn't like, that gets, a part of him that doesn't like and feels a little overwhelmed whenever he's in an environment where it's not quite familiar. It's kind of outside his frame of reference in a sense, although he loved theater, people, and artists, and things are a little chaotic. He did run into a couple people there that he knew, but there was something about it that he found off-putting, and let's face it, it probably was not, that it was a kind of bordello where you could pick up women, because that was something he liked. So, maybe I wonder if people were doing drugs. I wonder, if there was opium, smoking or anything going on, but he clearly found it a little off-putting. I'd love to know why, but he doesn't say. But, throughout all of this, the yacht club is really sort of his anchor. And the interesting thing about that is that it was kind of a club for old men, I mean, he even talks once about sitting down and playing cards with the old timers. And that's kind of his base or his anchor. You know, you saw in the previous diary entry that he was there, he had lunch there, and he kept going back during the day. And this time, too, you know, he's going to make a beeline for the yacht club to kind of wake up and get oriented and play billiards. Sheremetyev is back. Sheremetyev was someone, you know, a generation removed from Dmitri, but yeah, he liked playing billiards with him at the yacht club. Then he has, you know, an actual engagement to go for lunch at the Astoria. We talked about the Astoria, a very grand and famous hotel, and he's finding that it's quite full. There are lots of people there, presumably in the restaurant, having lunch in the lobby, and that's interesting. You know, I wonder what things, as I mentioned earlier, I wonder what things were like in comparable cities. You know, London, Paris, Berlin, Vienna. Would you have gone to the big hotels there? The Ritz in London or in Paris, the Adler, I think it was, in Berlin. Would you have found lots of fashionable people in those places in February 1915? I don't know. That would be an interesting study to make. But certainly in Petrograd, it's kind of, you know, partying like it's 1999, to quote Prince. Yeah, it's full of people, fashionable people. Okay, so Tornow could be any one of three brothers who had that surname. There were Yuri, Mikhail, and Sergei. They were all guards officers. There was a 10-year span between the three brothers, the oldest born in 1880, the youngest born in 1890. They were barons. Two of them were in the Preobrazhensky regiment, which is infantry, and one was in the Cavalier Guards, which was Dmitri's regiment. So I rather suspect that it was that one, Mikhail, whom Dmitri was having lunch with at the Astoria, because they were in the same regiment. So that would make the most sense. And clearly, you know, if indeed that is the case, Dmitri's regiment is not at the front at this time. Either that or Mikhail Tornow had some kind of, was on leave, which is quite possible. I need to look up and see where the Horse Guards were, actually. That would be interesting. And all three of the brothers will be mentioned later in the diaries, specifically in 1919 and 1920. Dmitri mentions that Gulesko was there. Gulesko was someone he'd seen in Moscow. He was a famous Romanian violinist and sort of a darling of the imperial court. So Dmitri doesn't tell us if he said hello, if they chatted, but he does note that he was there. Then he goes off to the Hotel Europe. So what do we know about the Hotel Europe? Well, the most important thing, it was another one of the grand hotels in the capital. The most important thing to know about it is that apparently it was the preferred hotel for people visiting from Europe. I don't know why. Maybe it had, management from somewhere in Europe, French or, not German at this time, or English. But when European foreigners came to Petrograd at that time, they apparently made a beeline for the Hotel Europe and stayed there. And indeed, the woman whom Dmitri is going to meet has a foreign name. Obviously, it's not her first name. Her name wasn't Roger so-and-so. It's her last name, and Dmitri spells it with a D, R-O-D-G-E-R, but he was notoriously bad at spelling. So, but anyway, with that last name, maybe it was Rogers. I don't know. It's just not possible to find her unless you really go deeply into your research. And apparently she was someone that he had hooked up with at some point. But this time she's just annoying him, and she's unbearable. And he said almost exactly the same thing about this actress that he met up with now I can't remember her name, but he met up with her in Moscow, and this time he just found her annoying and unbearable, and those are words that Dmitri uses consistently through all the diary entries, and I don't know what it was that made him feel that way about any given woman. I have a notion that until he met Vera Karali later that year, in 1916, I kind of think his relationships with women were pretty short-lived. And he then would, for whatever reason, get annoyed and, oh, she's unbearable. All right, so poor Roger. Sounds funny saying that. Then, let's see. Then he goes alone to Medved, the Bear, a very famous restaurant, very chic restaurant in Petrograd. I think it still exists in St. Petersburg now. And its sort of signature token was that it had a stuffed bear in the entry holding a tray for people to put their cards. And its other claim to fame was that it had the first American bar in the capital, in Petersburg, Petrograd. An American bar at that time, as I understand it, I could be wrong, was mostly a way to say a bar that served cocktails. And that was a novelty, actually. The cocktail was a novelty. And yeah, Dmitri doesn't seem to have spent a lot of time in these, famous nightclubs slash restaurants. The others were Yar and the Aquarium and the Bear, and he just doesn't. He goes to the hotels. I don't know why. He goes to the yacht club. He goes to the hotels. He made this little foray into Ugoluk, some kind of place like that you would find in Montmartre, right? You're kind of slumming it a little bit. You're not going to the Ritz. You're going to this little nightclub. I don't know. I could be wrong because the diaries are not, the 1915 diaries don't cover the whole year, but it seems like he didn't go to those places very often. Now that poor Crispin, he's got his cough. Okay. So he goes there to see a woman named Yelena Dmitrievna Benkendorf. She was the wife of a Benkendorf. A prominent family at court, and she was about 36 years old. She would end up getting a divorce and marrying a Radzianko, another prominent family at court and in government service. She's over 10 years older than him, which doesn't mean he wasn't looking at her as a possible hookup. I don't necessarily get that impression, but that was sort of his age range. And then he goes off to the Mikhailovsky Theater. He's not staying anywhere very long, is he? He's always been a kind of restless fellow. He goes off to the Mikhailovsky Theater, which was one of the most important imperial theaters. It had the emperor's box, the imperial box. Whether Dmitri would have had access to that on that particular occasion, I don't know. It was primarily not opera or operettas or ballet. It was primarily plays, dramas, if I understand correctly. And you had such notable figures as, say, Sarah Bernhardt performing there. But tonight it's some kind of musical thing. Monsieur Antoine Bretonneau, Dmitri spells Monsieur Mossier, and I don't know what kind of music he's playing, but apparently it's not good in Dmitri's estimation. He calls it, what does he call it? Terrible torment. Okay, so he probably doesn't stay there very long. But apparently he runs into someone at the theater, this very interesting and colorful figure by the name of Napoleon Achillovich Murat. Murat. Related to the famous family that we know from the French Revolution and the Napoleonic court. This man was in his 40s. He was a major general. He was this dashing playboy, swordsman kind of figure. He had been in Dmitri's regiment. He was from the Horse Guards. I'm not sure if he was at that time. I think he'd moved on to something else. Yeah, because they wouldn't have had a major general in the horse guards at that time. So I gather that Dmitri ran into him at the theater, and then they go together to the Hotel Europe to see someone called Mademoiselle Suzille. And again, we have the problem with Dimitri's spelling. This Antoine, the musician, Dmitri spells his surname Brotono, and I wasn't able to find that as an existing surname, that's ever existed. Mademoiselle, her surname is, or first name is spelled Suzile, Mademoiselle Suzille. So another foreign, non-Russian name at the Hotel Europe. What was she? I shudder to ask. Not really, but I don't know. The two of them, the Marat is kind of the real Don Juan, and in his 40s, and I don't know which one of them suggested, let's go see her, or if both of them knew her. They stay. What time is it when they finally get to the Hotel Europe? I'm not sure, but they stay there till 6 a.m. Dmitri says it was very lively. You could also translate it as great fun, So what does he mean by that? Well, it could be the same situation that you had at the Astoria, where it's full of people and, everything's great. Everybody's having a good time. Or it could be an insinuation that he and Marat got up to something with Mademoiselle Suzille, just like when he'd been in Moscow with the theater critic Plisheyev. The two of them had gone and picked up those two Polish women in a hotel bar or restaurant. So that's kind of his modus operandi, you could say. But anyway, they're out till 6 a.m. And what we have in the next diary entry is his operation to correct his deviated septum, his nose operation. So here he is out until 6 a.m. Previous to the nose operation, probably drinking quite a bit. So yeah, I don't know, but it wasn't an issue. Apparently he was able to recuperate by the time the doctors got there the next day to his palace. So just a couple of interesting side notes. Well, one in particular, everybody is older than him, everybody. And I think that was his comfort zone. And he wasn't going out with an entourage. He wasn't going out with an equerry or an adjutant. He was just going out by himself, like in the song. Some more from the song. Идешь по улице один, идешь кому-то из друзей, заходишь в гости без причин и просишь свежей новостей. So you go out alone. Идешь по улице один, alone. Then you stop by one of your friends' places, and for no reason, you just stop by and ask, what's going on. And then another verse, узнал, что где-то пьют вино, а где-то музыка слышна. Тебя зовут туда, где пьют, и ты берешь еще вина. So you find out where wine is being drunk, where people are enjoying themselves, and you find out where that is going to be and where music can be heard, where music will be playing, and you're drawn there. These places and these people are calling to you. You go there, you drink, and it's a Soviet way to spend the evening for a young person, and apparently it was the Imperial Russian way to spend an evening as well, but on a much, much grander scale. Not just dropping by a friend's house, but going to hotels and theaters, and all right. Wow, that was a long one. I did warn you. Tomorrow, the nose operation, so I hope to see you then. Bye.